Marcus Chen pulled his worn jacket tighter as he walked through the back alleys of New Shanghai Station. The space colony's artificial night cycle had begun, casting long shadows between the towering hab blocks. He clutched the small bag of synthetic protein bars he'd managed to buy with his last credits, his stomach growling in protest. Working double shifts at the cargo docks barely kept him fed, but it was honest work. Unlike many others on the outer rim stations, Marcus refused to turn to smuggling or worse just to survive. His parents had raised him better than that, even if they were long gone now. A soft whimper echoed from behind a pile of discarded shipping containers. Marcus paused, listening carefully. The sound came again, weak and desperate. Against his better judgment, he approached the source of the noise. What he found made his breath catch in his throat. Huddled between two rusted containers was a young woman, but clearly not human. Her skin had a pale blue tint that seemed to shimmer in the dim light, and her hair was silver white, cascading down her shoulders like liquid moonlight. Most striking were her eyes, large violet orbs that seemed to hold depths of intelligence and pain. She wore what might have once been elegant clothing, but now the fabric was torn and stained. Her alien features were sharp and angular, beautiful in an otherworldly way. But what grabbed Marcus's attention most was how thin she looked. Her cheekbones were pronounced, her arms like delicate twigs, and when she tried to stand at his approach, she swayed dangerously. "Please," she whispered in accented but clear standard, her voice like wind chimes. "I mean no harm. I am just seeking shelter." Marcus knew he should walk away. Aliens weren't exactly welcome on human stations, especially ones without proper documentation. The colonial authority had strict policies about unauthorized alien presence. Getting involved could cost him his job, his residency permit, maybe even land him in detention. But looking at her desperate state, seeing how her hands trembled with weakness, he couldn't bring himself to leave. "When did you last eat?" he asked gently, crouching down to her level. 3 days ago," she admitted, her voice barely audible. "Perhaps 4. Time becomes unclear when hunger clouds the mind." Without hesitation, Marcus opened his bag and pulled out one of his precious protein bars. He'd bought 6 with his last credits, intending to make them last the week until his next paycheck. But seeing her condition, he couldn't think of his own hunger. "Here," he said, offering her the bar. "It's not much, but it'll help." Her violet eyes widened in surprise, then filled with something that might have been tears. "But you need this. I can smell the hunger on you as well." "I'll manage," Marcus said firmly. "You need it more than I do." She took the bar with shaking hands, unwrapped it carefully, and took a small bite. The effect was almost immediate. A slight flush returned to her pale blue cheeks, and her hand steadied slightly. "Thank you," she breathed. "You do not know what this means. Among my people, sharing food with a stranger is considered one of the highest honors. It creates a bond that cannot be easily broken." "Your people?" Marcus asked, settling down beside her. "Where are you from?" "Far from here," she said sadly. "My name is Lyra. I come from Thyorian Prime in the Andromeda sector. I was traveling with my family when pirates attacked our ship. They took everything valuable and left the survivors stranded on the nearest station. Most managed to contact relatives or friends for help, but She looked down at her hands. "I have no one." Marcus felt a surge of anger at her story. Pirates were the scum of the galaxy, preying on peaceful travelers. "How long have you been here?" 2 weeks. "I have been sleeping wherever I can find shelter, looking for work. But no one will hire a Thyorian without papers. The pirates took those too." "That's illegal," Marcus said hotly. "You should report this to station security." Lyra laughed bitterly. "Station security cares little for alien problems. They told me to contact my embassy, but the nearest Thyorian diplomatic post is 3 sectors away. I have no way to reach them." Marcus studied her face, noting the exhaustion and hopelessness there. Something in his chest tightened. He'd always been the type to help others, even when he couldn't really afford to. His mother used to say it was both his greatest strength and his biggest weakness. "Listen," he said slowly. "I don't have much, but I have a small apartment. There's a couch you could sleep on, and I can share my food until we figure out something better." Lyra stared at him in shock. "You would do this for a stranger? An alien stranger?" "Human alien doesn't matter," Marcus said, standing and offering his hand. "Nobody should have to starve on the streets." She hesitated for a moment, then placed her delicate hand in his. Her skin was surprisingly warm despite its blue tint and softer than silk. As he helped her to her feet, she swayed again, and he quickly steadied her with an arm around her waist. "Easy there," he murmured. "When did you last have water?" "This morning from a public fountain," she admitted. Marcus shook his head. "Come on. My place isn't far." As they walked through the winding corridors of the station, Lyra leaning heavily on his arm, Marcus couldn't help but wonder what he was getting himself into. He barely knew this woman, and helping undocumented aliens could get him in serious trouble with the authorities. But looking down at her grateful face, seeing the hope that had replaced despair in her violet eyes, he knew he'd made the right choice. His parents had taught him that sometimes doing the right thing meant taking risks, even when you couldn't afford to. What he didn't know was that this simple act of kindness would change both their lives in ways he never could have imagined. Among Lyra's people, the sharing of food created bonds that went deeper than friendship, deeper than gratitude. It was the first step in something that could reshape the galaxy itself. But for now, all that mattered was getting her somewhere safe, fed, and warm. The rest would come later. Marcus's apartment was barely larger than a storage closet, with a single room that served as bedroom, kitchen, and living area. A small bathroom was tucked into one corner, and the only window showed a view of the station's industrial sector. To most people it would seem depressing, but to Lyra it felt like paradise. "It's beautiful," she whispered, running her fingers along the simple furniture with reverence. Marcus laughed softly. "You must be really tired if you think this place is beautiful." "But it's home." He guided her to the small couch, noting how she moved with unconscious grace despite her weakness. Even starving and exhausted, there was something regal about her bearing, as if nobility was bred into her very bones. "Let me get you some real food," he said, moving to the tiny kitchen area. "I've got some instant noodles, and I think there's a can of protein stew somewhere." While he prepared the meal, Lyra sat quietly, studying everything around her with obvious fascination. Her violet eyes lingered on the photos he'd hung on the walls, pictures of his parents, his graduation from technical school, a few friends from work. "Your family," she said softly when he brought her a steaming bowl. "They have kind faces. Like you." "They're gone now," Marcus said, settling beside her with his own smaller portion. "Shipping accident 3 years ago. Their transport hit a meteor field." "I am sorry," Lyra said, her voice filled with genuine pain. "Loss of family is one of the greatest sorrows. Among my people, we believe that those who die in the void between stars become guides for travelers." As she ate, color continued to return to her features. Marcus found himself studying her more closely, amazed by how different yet beautiful she was. Her bone structure was delicate but strong, and when she smiled at the taste of the food, her whole face lit up. "This is wonderful," she said between careful bites. "Human cuisine is very different from Thyorian food, but there is warmth in it, comfort." "Just instant noodles and processed meat," Marcus said, but he was pleased by her appreciation. "When you're feeling better, I'll cook you something proper." They ate in comfortable silence, and Marcus noticed that despite her obvious hunger, Lyra ate slowly and deliberately, never taking more than she needed. When she'd finished about half the bowl, she tried to hand it back to him. "I have had enough," she insisted. "You need to eat as well." "Finish it," Marcus said gently. "I can always make more." After the meal, Lyra's exhaustion became apparent. Her eyelids drooped and she swayed where she sat. Marcus quickly gathered some blankets and made up the couch for her. "Rest," he said. "We can figure out what to do next tomorrow." But as he turned to go to his own bed, Lyra caught his hand. "Marcus," she said, using his name for the first time. The way she pronounced it, with a slight musical quality, made it sound like poetry. "Why are you doing this?" "You know nothing about me, nothing about my people. For all you know, I could be dangerous." Marcus looked down at her serious expression, her violet eyes searching his face for answers. "Maybe," he said slowly. "But you're not, are you?" "I can see it in your eyes. Besides, my parents taught me that kindness is never wasted even when it's risky." Lyra squeezed his hand gently. "Your parents were wise." "Among my people there is an old saying, the greatest strength is not in the body or mind, but in the heart that chooses compassion over fear. You have such a heart." That night, Marcus lay awake listening to Lyra's soft breathing from the other room. He'd acted on impulse, but now reality was setting in. He was harboring an undocumented alien, which could cost him everything. If station security found out, they'd both be in serious trouble. But every time he considered his options, he remembered the desperation in her eyes, the grateful way she'd eaten the simple meal he'd provided. He couldn't bring himself to regret his choice. The next morning, Marcus woke to the smell of something amazing cooking. He stumbled out of bed to find Lyra in the kitchen area, somehow having transformed his meager ingredients into what looked like a feast. "Good morning," she said brightly, looking far better than she had the night before. "I hope you do not mind that I prepared breakfast. I wish to show my gratitude." "You didn't have to," Marcus protested, but his stomach was already responding to the incredible smells. In Thyorian culture, sharing in the preparation of food is as important as sharing in its consumption, Lyra explained, placing a plate before him. "It is how we build trust and understanding." The meal was unlike anything Marcus had ever tasted. Somehow Lyra had taken his basic ingredients and created something that was both exotic and comforting, with flavors that seemed to dance on his tongue. "This is incredible," he said between bites. "How did you learn to cook like this?" Lyra blushed, the blue of her cheeks darkening slightly. "Cooking is considered one of the essential arts among my people. We believe that food prepared with care and intention nourishes not just the body but the soul." As they ate together, Marcus found himself drawn into conversation with her. Lyra was intelligent and curious, asking thoughtful questions about human culture and sharing fascinating details about her own people. She spoke of Thyorian Prime's floating cities, of their advanced technology that worked in harmony with nature, of their complex social structures based on artistic achievement and emotional intelligence. "Your people sound amazing," Marcus said. "It must be hard being so far from home." Lyra's expression grew sad. "It is more than distance. Without my family markings, without my identity papers, I am nothing here. On Thyorian Prime, I was training to be a cultural ambassador. I had a future, a purpose. Here I am just another refugee." "That's not true," Marcus said firmly. "You're brilliant, talented, kind. Any society would be lucky to have you." Lyra looked at him with surprise, as if no one had ever told her such things before. "You truly believe this?" "Absolutely. We just need to figure out how to prove it to everyone else." As the days passed, they fell into a routine. Marcus would go to work at the docks while Lyra stayed in the apartment, spending her time learning about human culture through his computer terminal. She was a quick study, absorbing information at an astonishing rate. In the evenings, they would share meals and conversation. Lyra continued to amaze him with her cooking, somehow making his simple ingredients into culinary masterpieces. More importantly, her presence transformed his lonely apartment into something that felt like a real home. Marcus found himself looking forward to coming back each day, to seeing her bright smile and hearing about what she'd learned. She had a way of finding wonder in the smallest things, and her enthusiasm was infectious. But beneath the growing comfort between them, Marcus sensed something deeper developing. The way Lyra looked at him sometimes with an intensity that made his heart race. The way she would find excuses to touch his hand or stand close to him. The way she seemed to hang on his every word when he talked about his dreams and aspirations. What he didn't understand was that among her people, the act of sharing food and shelter created bonds that went far beyond human concepts of friendship. For Thyorians, such intimacy was the foundation of something much more profound, something that could reshape destinies and bridge the gap between species. The change was coming, and neither of them was prepared for what it would mean. 3 weeks into their arrangement, Marcus began to notice changes in Lyra's behavior that both confused and intrigued him. She'd grown more beautiful, if that was even possible. Her silver hair seemed to shimmer with an inner light, and her violet eyes held depths that seemed to pull at something deep in his chest. But more than that, she'd become increasingly attentive to his needs, often anticipating what he wanted before he even knew it himself. "You work too hard," she said one evening, appearing behind him as he rubbed his sore shoulders after another grueling day at the docks. Without asking permission, her delicate hands began to massage the tension from his muscles, and Marcus nearly groaned with relief. Her touch was electric, sending warmth through his entire body. "Lyra, you don't need to do this," he protested weakly, even as he melted under her skilled fingers. "I want to," she said softly, her breath warm against his ear. "You have given me so much. Let me give something back." As her hands worked magic on his tired muscles, Marcus found himself relaxing completely for the first time in weeks. But he couldn't shake the feeling that something fundamental was changing between them. Something he didn't fully understand. "Lyra," he said carefully, "can I ask you something about Theorian culture?" Her hands paused for a moment. "Of course. What would you like to know?" "The way you've been taking care of me, cooking for me, this massage. Is this normal behavior between friends among your people?" Lyra was quiet for so long that Marcus began to worry he'd offended her. When she finally spoke, her voice was barely above a whisper. "Among my people, there are different levels of relationship. The sharing of food, especially over an extended period, creates bonds that go beyond friendship. When a Thiarian regularly prepares meals for another, tends to their comfort, shares their living space, it is considered the beginning of courtship." Marcus felt his heart skip a beat. "Courtship? I did not tell you this because I was afraid you would ask me to leave," Lyra continued, her hands now still on his shoulders. "Human customs are different, I know. But I could not help myself. The way you cared for me when I was starving, the kindness you showed a stranger, the honor you displayed by sacrificing your own needs for mine, these are the qualities my people value most in a potential mate." Marcus turned to face her, seeing vulnerability and fear in her violet eyes. "Lyra, I had no idea. I don't want you to think I was taking advantage of you or leading you on." "You were not," she assured him quickly. "Everything you did was honest and pure. That is why I found myself drawn to you. Marcus, among my people I am considered highly desirable. I come from an ancient family. I have advanced education and I possess skills that are valued in our society. Before the pirates I had many suitors vying for my attention." She moved closer to him, her eyes never leaving his face. "But none of them ever made me feel the way you do. None of them would have shared their last meal with a starving stranger. None of them would have risked their own security to help someone they barely knew." Marcus felt his head spinning. "But we're different species. How would something like that even work?" Lyra smiled shyly. "Thiorians and humans are more compatible than you might think. Our genetics are similar enough that we can bond completely, even have children together. The offspring are usually blessed with the best traits of both species." "Children?" Marcus's voice cracked slightly. "If you wanted them," Lyra said quickly, misreading his surprise as rejection. "I know this is sudden, and I know our species have different customs about such things. I do not expect you to return my feelings just because I have developed them." Marcus looked at her beautiful, earnest face, thinking about the past 3 weeks. How empty his life had been before she arrived and how full it felt now. How he'd started looking forward to coming home each day, to seeing her smile and hearing her voice. How the thought of her leaving made his chest ache. "Lyra," he said carefully, "I need you to understand something. What you're describing, these feelings you have, they're not one-sided." Her eyes widened. "They are not?" "I've been fighting them because I thought they were impossible," Marcus admitted. "You're brilliant, beautiful, from an advanced civilization. I'm just a dock worker barely scraping by on a frontier station. I never imagined someone like you could have feelings for someone like me." Lyra reached out and cupped his face gently in her hands. "Marcus, do you not see yourself clearly? You are everything my people value. You are kind, honorable, selfless. You work hard and never complain. You treated a desperate stranger with dignity and compassion. These qualities are worth more than all the wealth and status in the galaxy." Looking into her eyes, Marcus felt something click into place, as if a piece of himself he hadn't known was missing had finally been found. "So what happens now?" he asked. "Now," Lyra said, her voice growing stronger, "I ask you formally if you would accept my courtship. Among my people, this is a serious commitment. If you agree, we would be bound together for a trial period during which we explore our compatibility. If at the end of that time we both wish it, we can formalize our union permanently." Marcus thought about everything that had led to this moment. The loneliness he'd lived with since his parents died, the empty apartment that had become a warm home, the way Lyra made him want to be better than he was. "There's something I need to tell you first," he said. "I'm not wealthy. I don't have connections or influence. My job barely pays enough to keep us both fed. I can't offer you the kind of life you're used to." Lyra laughed, a sound like silver bells. "Marcus, I have lived on the streets scavenging for scraps. The life you offer me, humble though it may be, is filled with something far more valuable than material wealth. It is filled with love." The word hung in the air between them. And Marcus realized that was exactly what he'd been feeling but hadn't dared to name. Love. Not just attraction or affection, but deep soul-level love for this remarkable woman who had transformed his world. Then yes, he said, his voice steady despite the magnitude of what he was agreeing to. I accept your courtship, Lyra. I want to build something with you, whatever that might look like. Lyra's face lit up with joy so pure it took Marcus's breath away. In her culture's way, she pressed her forehead to his, and Marcus felt a warmth spread through him that had nothing to do with physical attraction and everything to do with the recognition of finding his other half. There is one more thing I must tell you, Lyra said softly. The courtship bond creates certain changes in Thyorian physiology. I will become even more attuned to your needs and emotions. My appearance may change as my body prepares for the possibility of bonding permanently, and my fertility will increase dramatically. That sounds intense, Marcus said, though he found the prospect more exciting than intimidating. It is, Lyra agreed, but it is also beautiful. You will find that your own emotions become clearer, your protective instincts stronger. The bond enhances the best qualities in both partners. As she spoke, Marcus noticed that her skin seemed to glow with a soft inner light, and her violet eyes had deepened to an almost hypnotic intensity. The change was subtle but unmistakable, and he found himself drawn to her even more powerfully than before. I should also mention, Lyra added with a shy smile, that among my people, once a courtship bond is formed, the female often becomes quite focused on the idea of bearing her chosen mate's children. It is a biological imperative that can be quite strong. Marcus felt heat flood his cheeks. How strong are we talking about here? Lyra's smile became decidedly impish. You will find out soon enough. The morning after their courtship declaration, Marcus woke to find Lyra standing at their small window, her silhouette outlined by the artificial dawn of the station's lighting system. The change in her was immediately apparent. Her silver hair seemed to move with its own gentle current, and her skin had taken on a luminescent quality that made her appear almost ethereal. Lyra, he called softly, and when she turned to him, he nearly gasped. Her violet eyes now held flecks of gold, and there was an intensity in her gaze that made his heart race. Good morning, my chosen, she said, her voice carrying new harmonics that seemed to resonate in his bones. I have been thinking about our future together. Before Marcus could respond, she moved to him with that fluid grace that had always marked her movements, but now seemed even more pronounced. She settled beside him on the bed, close enough that he could feel the warmth radiating from her skin. The courtship bond has awakened something in me, she said, her hand finding his. I find myself thinking constantly about starting a family with you, about carrying your children. Is this something you have considered? Marcus felt his mouth go dry. While he'd always vaguely assumed he'd have a family someday, it had always been a distant concept. But looking at Lyra, seeing the hopeful longing in her transformed features, the idea suddenly felt very real and immediate. I've thought about it, he admitted. But Lyra, we've only known each other a few weeks, and there are practical considerations. This apartment is barely big enough for 2 people, let alone children. My job doesn't pay enough to support a family. These are temporary obstacles, Lyra said with surprising confidence. I have skills that could be valuable once I obtain proper documentation. And Marcus, you should know that among my people, the desire to reproduce during courtship is not just emotional, it is biological. My body is preparing itself, and the urge is becoming quite powerful. As if to emphasize her point, she leaned closer, and Marcus caught a subtle scent that seemed to trigger something primal in his brain. His pulse quickened, and he found himself struggling to maintain rational thought. We should take things slowly, he managed to say, though his body was arguing strongly against his words. Lyra smiled, and there was something both innocent and knowing in her expression. Of course, I would never pressure you into anything. But Marcus, you should be prepared for the fact that my courtship behaviors will become more intense as time progresses. It is simply how my species is designed. Their intimate conversation was interrupted by a sharp knock at the door. Both of them froze, and Marcus felt a spike of fear. Few people knew where he lived, and unexpected visitors rarely brought good news. Mr. Chen, came a gruff voice from outside. This is station security. We need to speak with you. Marcus's blood turned to ice. He looked at Lyra, seeing his own fear reflected in her eyes, though she also showed a calm resolve that surprised him. The bathroom, he whispered urgently. Hide in there and stay quiet. But Lyra shook her head. No. If they are here about me, running will only make things worse. I will not let you face this alone. The knocking came again, more insistent this time. Mr. Chen, please open the door. With Lyra standing beside him, Marcus opened the door to find 2 security officers in full uniform. Behind them stood a man in expensive civilian clothes who had the look of someone used to wielding authority. Mr. Chen, the lead officer said, I'm Sergeant Torres. We've received reports of an undocumented alien in this sector. We need to search your apartment. What kind of reports? Marcus asked, trying to keep his voice steady. The civilian stepped forward. The kind that come from concerned citizens who notice strange smells and unusual activities, he said, with barely concealed smugness. Marcus recognized him now as Hendricks, one of the station administrators who'd always treated dock workers like dirt. This is harassment, Marcus protested. I haven't done anything wrong. Then you won't mind if we take a look around, Sergeant Torres said, though his tone was more apologetic than threatening. I'm sorry about this, Chen. Orders are orders. Before Marcus could object further, Lyra stepped into view. There is no need to search, she said calmly. I am the individual you seek. Both officers stepped back in surprise at her appearance. Even without her enhanced courtship features, Lyra was obviously non-human, and her current luminescent state made her appear almost supernatural. Jesus, the younger officer breathed. What is she? I am Thyorian, Lyra said with quiet dignity. And yes, I am undocumented. My papers were stolen by pirates. Hendricks smiled nastily. There we are. I knew something was going on in this sector. The smell of alien cooking has been getting complaints from decent families. The smell of alien cooking? Marcus stepped forward angrily. You mean the smell of food? Since when is that a crime? Since it involves harboring an illegal alien, Hendricks shot back. Mr. Chen, you're under arrest for violation of colonial authority regulations regarding undocumented aliens. Wait, Sergeant Torres intervened, looking uncomfortable. Let's not get ahead of ourselves. Miss, do you have any proof of your identity? Any way to verify your story about the pirates? Lyra reached into the folds of her dress and pulled out a small, intricately carved pendant. This is all I have left. It bears the markings of my family house on Thyorian Prime. Perhaps your databases could verify its authenticity. The sergeant took the pendant and examined it carefully. I'll need to run this through channels. In the meantime, I'm afraid you'll both need to come with us for questioning. This is ridiculous, Marcus protested. She hasn't committed any crimes. Being robbed by pirates isn't illegal. No, but entering human space without proper documentation is, Hendricks said smugly. And harboring someone who has done so is also against regulations. As the officers prepared to escort them away, Lyra caught Marcus's hand. Whatever happens, she said quietly, I want you to know that these have been the happiest weeks of my life. The courtship bond we share cannot be broken by their laws. Nothing's going to happen to you, Marcus said fiercely. I won't let them deport you or worse. But as they were led through the corridors of the station, past neighbors who watched with curiosity and judgment, Marcus couldn't shake the feeling that their newfound happiness was about to be torn apart. What he didn't know was that Lyra's pendant carried more significance than even she realized, and that their story was about to take a turn that would shock everyone involved. In the holding area, as they waited for processing, Lyra moved closer to Marcus despite the watchful eyes of the guards. There is something I must tell you, she whispered urgently. The courtship bond creates protective instincts in Thyorian females. If they try to separate us, if they threaten you, I may not be able to control my response. And what do you mean? Marcus asked. Lyra's eyes flickered with that golden light again. I mean that my people are not as helpless as we appear, and a Thyorian female protecting her chosen mate is a force that few species are prepared to handle. Marcus felt a chill that had nothing to do with fear and everything to do with the realization that there was much more to Lyra than he had ever imagined. Their quiet life together was about to explode into something much larger and more dangerous than either of them had anticipated. The interrogation room was stark and cold, with harsh lighting that made everything look washed out except for Lyra, who seemed to glow even brighter under the artificial illumination. Marcus sat beside her, their hands linked despite the disapproving looks from the guards. Across from them, Sergeant Torres studied the results on his datapad, while Hendricks paced impatiently. Well, Hendricks demanded. What do the databases say about her little trinket? Torres looked up with an expression of confusion and something that might have been awe. The pendant checks out. It's authentic Thyorian craftsmanship, and the family markings are genuine. But there's something else. He turned the datapad toward them, showing a complex genealogical chart. According to Thyorian records, this pendant belongs to the House of Veltar, one of the oldest and most respected bloodlines on Thyorian Prime. The current head of the house is Ambassador Veltar Nisira, who serves as the Thyorian representative to the Galactic Council. Lyra straightened in her chair, her violet eyes widening. That is my grandmother's name, but I do not understand. There's more, Torres continued, scrolling through the data. Lady Lyra Ani Veltar has been reported missing for over a month. Her transport was attacked by pirates in the neutral zone, and she was presumed dead when no survivors were found. Hendricks stopped pacing, his face going pale. Are you telling me she's Thyorian nobility? Not just nobility, Torres said grimly. According to this, she's the granddaughter of one of the most powerful diplomats in the galaxy. And we've been holding her in a detention cell. Marcus felt Lyra's hand tighten in his. Lyra, why didn't you tell me? I did not think it mattered, she said quietly, though her voice carried new authority. When you are stripped of everything, when you are starving and alone, titles and bloodlines mean nothing. What mattered was your kindness to a stranger, not my family name. But it does matter now, Torres said, standing abruptly. Miss Veltar, I need to contact your embassy immediately. This is a diplomatic incident waiting to happen. Wait, Lyra said, her voice suddenly sharp with command. Before you do anything, I want to make something clear. Mr. Chen is under my protection. He saved my life, gave me shelter when no one else would help. If your authorities attempt to punish him for his kindness, they will answer to my family. Hendricks had gone from pale to green. Now see here, you can't just threaten human authorities because you have connections. Lyra stood slowly, and Marcus watched in amazement as she seemed to transform before his eyes. Gone was the vulnerable refugee he'd rescued. In her place stood someone who clearly had been born to command respect, her luminescent features radiating quiet power. Mr. Hendricks, she said, her voice carrying harmonics that seemed to vibrate through the room. I am not threatening anyone. I am stating facts. Marcus Chen showed mercy to someone he believed was a helpless stranger. That act of compassion created a debt that my family and my people take very seriously. Any attempt to harm him would be considered an act of aggression against the House of Veltar. You're talking about starting an interstellar incident over a dock worker? Hendricks sputtered. I'm talking about honor, Lyra replied coldly. Something that my people value above politics or convenience. And yes, I would risk much to protect the man who protected me. Torres held up his hands peacefully. Let's all calm down. Miss Veltar, no one is talking about punishing Mr. Chen. The regulations are clear that harboring undocumented aliens is illegal, but there are provisions for humanitarian circumstances. Good, Lyra said, some of the ice leaving her voice. Then perhaps we can resolve this matter quickly. I wish to contact my grandmother so she can arrange proper documentation for me, and I want it clear that Marcus will face no consequences for his actions. As Torres prepared to make the call to the Thyorian embassy, Marcus found himself studying Lyra with new eyes. The woman who had been preparing breakfast for him just hours ago was clearly much more than he had ever imagined. Why didn't you tell me? He asked quietly. Lyra turned to him and her expression softened back into the woman he'd fallen in love with. Because I was afraid, she admitted. When I was on the streets, desperate and starving, I learned what people truly valued. Not my bloodline or my education, but only what I could offer them immediately. You helped me without knowing who I was, without expecting anything in return. That meant everything to me. But now that they know, now things become complicated, Lyra said sadly. My family will want me to return home immediately. They will arrange transport, protection, everything I need to resume my former life. But Marcus, I do not want my former life. I want the life we were building together. Before Marcus could respond, Torres returned with news. I've spoken with the Thyorian embassy. Ambassador Veltar is sending a ship to collect her granddaughter immediately. They'll be here within hours. And what about the charges against Mr. Chen? Lyra asked sharply. Dropped completely, Torres assured her. In fact, the ambassador specifically requested that he be commended for his humanitarian actions. Hendricks looked like he'd swallowed something sour, but he kept quiet. As they were released and escorted back to Marcus's apartment to wait for the Theorian ship, Marcus felt a growing sense of dread. Everything was happening too fast, and he could feel Lyra slipping away from him despite their courtship bond. "What happens now?" he asked as they stood in his small apartment, which suddenly felt impossibly empty despite her presence. "I do not know," Lyra admitted, moving to the window to watch for her family's ship. "My grandmother will expect me to return to Thiorian Prime, to resume my training as a diplomat. She may try to arrange a marriage with someone of appropriate status. And what do you want?" Lyra turned to face him, her violet and gold eyes filled with determination. "I want to complete our courtship. I want to bear your children and build a life with you regardless of the consequences. But," Marcus could hear the unspoken words, "but my family has invested much in my education and my future. My marriage could strengthen important political alliances. There are obligations I cannot simply ignore." They stood in silence for a moment, the weight of their impossible situation settling between them. Then Marcus made a decision that surprised even himself. "Then we'll figure it out together," he said firmly. "I don't care about politics or bloodlines. I care about you. If your family wants to meet the man you're considering binding yourself to, then they can meet me." Lyra stared at him in shock. "Marcus, you do not understand what you are saying. Theorian society is complex, formal. They will never accept a human dock worker as a suitable match for someone of my standing." Marcus smiled, feeling more confident than he had since the security officers knocked on his door. "Then I guess I'll have to prove them wrong. After all, I already won over the most important member of your family. How hard can the rest be?" Despite everything, Lyra laughed, the sound bright and musical in the small space. "You're either very brave or very foolish." "Probably both," Marcus admitted. "But I'm not giving up on us without a fight." Outside, the lights of an approaching ship began to shine through their window, elegant and alien in design. Whatever came next, their quiet life together was about to change forever. The Thiorian ship that docked at New Shanghai Station was unlike anything Marcus had ever seen. It seemed to be grown rather than built, its organic curves gleaming with the same luminescent quality as Lyra's skin. When the airlock opened, 3 figures emerged that commanded immediate respect from even the station's most jaded officials. Ambassador Veltar Nisira was tall and elegant, her silver hair woven with what looked like starlight, her violet eyes sharp with intelligence and authority. She was flanked by 2 younger Thiorians who were obviously guards, though they carried no visible weapons. "Grandmother," Lyra said formally, bowing deeply as the ambassador approached. "Lyra Ani," the ambassador replied, her voice carrying the same musical quality as her granddaughter's, but with undertones of command that had clearly shaped galactic policy for decades. "We feared you were dead. The reports from the pirate attack suggested no survivors." "I nearly was dead," Lyra said quietly. "If not for this man's kindness, I would have perished on the streets of this station." Ambassador Veltar turned her penetrating gaze to Marcus, who forced himself to meet her eyes despite feeling completely outclassed. "You are Marcus Chen?" "Yes, ma'am," Marcus replied, grateful that his voice remained steady. "My granddaughter's communications have been quite detailed regarding your relationship," the ambassador said, her tone carefully neutral. "You understand that she is one of our most promising young diplomats, destined for significant responsibilities within our society." "I understand that she's remarkable," Marcus said honestly. "I also understand that you probably think I'm not good enough for her, and you're probably right. But I love her and she says she loves me. That has to count for something." The ambassador studied him in silence for a long moment, then glanced at Lyra, whose luminescent skin was practically glowing with nervous energy. "Granddaughter, is the courtship bond truly active?" "Yes," Lyra said, lifting her chin with quiet pride. "I have chosen Marcus as my mate and he has accepted. The biological changes have already begun." "I see," the ambassador murmured, and Marcus caught a flicker of what might have been amusement in her eyes. "And you, Mr. Chen, understand what this bond entails? The cultural implications, the biological realities?" "I'm learning," Marcus said. "But I know enough to understand that Lyra isn't just choosing me as a romantic partner. Among your people, this is about family, about the future. I don't take that lightly. And yet you work manual labor on a frontier station. You have no formal education beyond basic technical training, no family connections, no wealth or status to offer. Marcus felt his face flush with embarrassment and anger. No, I don't. All I can offer is that I'll spend every day of my life trying to make her happy and keep her safe. Grandmother, Lyra interjected, moving closer to Marcus. Those qualities are exactly why I chose him. He shared his last meal with a starving stranger. He risked his own security to help someone he barely knew. He treated me with kindness and respect when I had nothing to offer in return. These are the values our people claim to cherish. Yet how many of our nobility would have acted as he did? The ambassador was quiet for a long moment, studying both of them. Then she did something that shocked everyone present. She smiled. Lyra Annie, you sound exactly like your grandfather when he was your age. He chose me over 3 politically advantageous marriages, claiming that love and character were worth more than treaties and trade agreements. Our union was considered scandalous at the time. It was? Lyra asked in surprise. Oh yes. A career diplomat marrying a mere scientist? The gossips had a field day. The ambassador turned back to Marcus. However, Mr. Chen, if you wish to complete this courtship and formalize a bond with my granddaughter, you will need to prove yourself worthy not just to her, but to our people. Are you prepared for that challenge? What would that involve? Marcus asked cautiously. Coming to Thyorian Prime as Lyra's chosen mate, undergoing the traditional trials that prove your commitment, your integrity, and your ability to protect and provide for your family. It will not be easy, and there is a possibility you could fail. Marcus looked at Lyra, seeing hope and fear warring in her expression. What happens if I fail? Then the courtship bond would be dissolved, and you would be returned to human space with the gratitude of our people for saving Lyra's life, the ambassador said matter-of-factly. And if I succeed? Then you would be welcomed into the house of Veltar as my granddaughter's husband, with all the rights and responsibilities that entails. You would become a bridge between our species, helping to foster better understanding and cooperation. Lyra stepped forward urgently. Marcus, you do not have to do this. The trials are designed to test Thyorian males, not humans. They may ask things of you that are impossible for your species. What kind of things? Marcus asked. The ambassador answered. Tests of emotional intelligence, of artistic capability, of your ability to harmonize your mind with Lyra's during stressful situations. Physical trials that require not strength but endurance and adaptability. Most challenging of all, you would need to prove that you can truly understand and appreciate our culture without losing your own identity. Marcus thought about everything that had brought him to this moment. The loneliness he'd lived with for years, the completeness he felt with Lyra, the future they'd begun to imagine together. Then he thought about the alternative, giving up and watching her return to a life he could never be part of. I'll do it, he said firmly. I'll take your trials. Marcus, Lyra breathed, moving closer to him. Are you certain? If you fail, we can never bond properly. We would lose each other forever. Marcus cupped her luminescent face in his hands, marveling again at how perfectly she fit against him. Lyra, you saved my life just as much as I saved yours. You made me remember what it felt like to have a home, a purpose beyond just surviving. I'm not going to give that up without a fight. The ambassador watched their interaction with keen interest. There is one more thing you should know, Mr. Chen. The trials typically take several months to complete. During that time, if the biological bond continues to strengthen, as I suspect it will, Lyra's desire for children will become quite overwhelming. Are you prepared for the possibility of becoming a father in the very near future? Marcus felt heat flood his face, but he met the ambassador's gaze steadily. If that's what happens, then I'll do everything in my power to be the best father I can be. Lyra's luminescence increased dramatically, and she pressed closer to him. In that case, she whispered, we should perhaps discuss something I have been meaning to tell you. Thyorian courtship bonds, once they reach a certain intensity, can sometimes lead to pregnancy even without physical consummation. The emotional and psychological connection becomes so strong that biological processes begin automatically. Marcus stared at her. Are you saying? I'm saying that I believe I am already carrying your child, Lyra said softly. The changes in my body, the intensity of my feelings, the way the bond pulls at me, all signs point to early pregnancy. The ambassador raised an eyebrow. Well, that does accelerate things considerably. If you are indeed pregnant, Mr. Chen, then you have already proven the compatibility that many of our trials are designed to test. The question becomes whether you are prepared to become not just a husband but a father, and to raise a child who will bridge two worlds. Marcus looked at Lyra's hopeful, anxious expression, then at her formidable grandmother, then back at the woman who had transformed his life in ways he was still discovering. "I spent years just trying to survive," he said slowly. "Working, eating, sleeping, repeat. But with Lyra, I've remembered what it means to truly live, to hope for something better. If she's carrying my child, then that's not a complication, it's a gift. And I'll spend the rest of my life proving I'm worthy of both of them." The ambassador smiled broadly for the first time.
"In that case, Mr. Chen, I believe we should begin planning a wedding."
"The trials can wait until after you've had time to properly adjust to your new roles. After all, a pregnant Thyorian female should not be subjected to the stress of wondering whether her mate will be accepted by her family." As Lyra threw her arms around him in joy, Marcus realized that his simple act of sharing a meal with a hungry stranger had led to the most incredible adventure of his life. He was about to become a husband, a father, and apparently some kind of interstellar diplomat. Looking down at Lyra's radiant face, feeling their child growing within her, Marcus knew that whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face them together, and somehow that made him feel capable of anything,